Well, good morning and welcome to Job 26, and we're carrying on in our a little just parallel thing to our Bible reading plan in the book of Job to help us get into this great book together. We're calling it a believer's guide to loss and loneliness, and Job has, if you remember, lost everything really in his life. Only his wife remains, and she wasn't exactly helpful back at the beginning of the book. He lost 10 children, perfect family. Great life. He was the greatest man in the Near East, and all because he's a believer in God, and that's the wrestle that Job's having. And his friends have been less than helpful, and we've just come to the end of their advice to him. And we just heard Bildad in chapter 25, if you remember it from yesterday, and he's just been saying some true things that told Job about how God is totally sovereign and how he's totally pure, and yet we are totally sinful, and therefore that Job has no hope at all. And now Job is going to respond, and he doesn't quite know how this can happen, but he is confident that God has the answer. Bildad doesn't. Bildad has no comfort, but he is hopeful in God, and we're going to see that in this short chapter in 26 as he answers him. Verse 1 to 4 is just full of biting sarcasm. Basically saying, look, your wisdom had absolutely no help to me at all. How you have helped him who has no power. Yeah, thanks, Bildad. That's been a real great blessing. You've brought me right down. You told me not only have I lost everything, but God is just implacably against me, and I can't do anything about it. Thanks for that. You have saved the arm that has no strength. You've just called me a maggot and a worm and left me there in the dirt. Thanks for that. How you have counselled him who has no wisdom and plentifully declared sound knowledge. Yeah, thanks for that, mate. Your wisdom has no power to save me. This is verse 2, saved, and verse 2, helped. Those repeated words are the issue. They haven't helped or saved. This wisdom is a powerless wisdom, because no religion or philosophy can help the helpless and save us from our sin, which is what Bildad has rightly pointed to is our deepest problem. Only Jesus and only his death is the undeserved suffering that Jesus went through, therefore, that brings undeserved grace and mercy to sinners. That's the wisdom of God, as we'll see at the end of this chapter. So, verse 5 through to 13, we're going to see how Job says, look, wisdom, true helping wisdom, comes from God, the sovereign God. And he's sovereign over so many things. Sovereign over death in verses 5 to 6. So he begins kind of with life under the sea, under the waters in verse 5, and it's the dead who tremble. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. Everything is open before God. The realm of the dead. You can't die and not be under God's gaze. God, all of that whole realm. It's not like there's another spiritual power who has control over the dark realm. We often, cartoons have Satan and a pitchfork and him ruling hell. And Job's saying, no, all of the underworld, all of that is open to God. God is sovereign over death and the dead. Sovereign also over creation, verse 7 to 11, and so many aspects of creation. So we're now above the sea, we're on the ground, but we're just seeing the whole of creation, how God stretches over the north over the void, and hangs the earth on nothing, binds up the waters in his thick clouds, and the clouds will not split open under them. So talking about how there are foundations for the earth, how there's God separates water from water. It's incredible, isn't it? How you've got the seas, and then you've got the clouds, and somehow that cloud doesn't just crash down all on the earth like it did in the flood. There's order, there's protection from chaos that God gives to the world. So there's a lovely created order. There are boundaries. Verse 10. That's how God has created the world, and yet verse 11, he can shake it all up. It's his beautiful snow globe, but he is the one who can pick it up and shake it, and everything spin round in it. And the comforters it's like they think everything is the snow globe, and they just see things in terms of the order that there is. But Job's saying, no, the God I believe in is the one who can pick up the snow globe and shake it around. He's the one who's totally sovereign over all thing. God transcends your little system, Bildad and friends. And God is also, and this is really, really important, sovereign over evil, verse 12 to 13. So by his power, he stilled the sea. The sea was a representation of all the forces of chaos and mayhem in the ancient world. And this mention of Rahab, by his understanding, he shattered Rahab. There's a parallel here in verse 13. His hand pierced the fleeing serpent. Rahab, the fleeing serpent, in Isaiah 27 is called Leviathan. We're going to meet Leviathan in chapter 41. This is the, in a sense, the language of not exactly fairy tales, but the mythology of the Near East, talking about real powers, but in picture language of this serpent. But of course, going back to Genesis 3, we know that the serpent came to Adam and Eve, the real enemy of God. It takes the form of a serpent. So that's the kind of language that's being used here. But God is undoing the serpent and can bring just the blow of his breath, by his power, by his wind. He can still the storm of evil. These evil powers are huge, but God is greater. And verse 14, therefore, God's wisdom is bigger and better than yours, Bildad. Here I am, I've described the whole creation and order of the entire cosmos, but we're just on the outskirts of God's wisdom and power. And that is what I'm hoping in. Imagine it's like the kids are on a journey. You've been on a long journey with kids in the back of the car, and you've driven for hours and hours, and they say, are we there yet? And like, no, we're just on the outskirts. We haven't even begun really. And that's what Job's saying. He's been in a sense taking a journey through the whole of creation. And no, that's just we've just basically got in the car. There's still so much more of God to understand. The thunder of his power, who can understand? And all of this is Job's sense that there's a great work that God can do to bring sinners out of and justify them and set them right with him, and that evil is real and is going to be restrained. So Job's got that sense that what's come upon him is an attack of evil, but God's got it in hand. And so all of this points us to that wisdom of the cross. We're told in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18 to 31, how God's wisdom is so much greater than man's wisdom, and God's power than man's power. And that wisdom and that power is displayed in the foolishness and the weakness of the cross of Christ. Jesus, who suffered more than Job, came from higher, went to lower, did that to raise up Job, to raise up all believers in him, sinners who would be just condemned, but who now are lifted to the heights that he has for them. And that is the deep wisdom of God, and it's what Job points us to. And we get this lovely vision of kind of blurry. He's not seeing it yet, he's reaching for it. But as we see the New Testament, we can see Christ that he is longing for, and we can rejoice in him.